knowledge systems have been gaining in importance over a long period of time, and of late, especially in the background of NEP 2020, it has gained a lot of significance. So philosophy is all about philosophizing, and this is actually the right time to philosophize about what exactly is the relevance of Indian knowledge systems in a fast transforming society. We know that the world today is changing at a rapid pace, thanks largely to the digital technology and its exponential growth. So this is the right time to reflect, ponder over what is basically the relevance of the Indian knowledge systems in the current era. Can it actually enrich our lives? Can it contribute in any measure for the development of society across the globe? So this is precisely what I'd like to put in. I'd just like to put in some of my reflections on this particular domain. And the relevance and importance of this domain is, of course, it cannot really be debated. So, see, this is basically the theme. What is basically the relevance of the Indian knowledge systems in the digital era? Now, just to begin with, I'd like to say that, as pointed out by Sri Kumar ji earlier, philosophy is really the mother of all disciplines. It is very often called as the mother of all disciplines, and there is a reason for it. The reason is that in the ancient world, whatever civilization we may speak of, in the ancient world, all human attempts to know themselves and the world around them, that was brought under the single umbrella term philosophy. So in the ancient world, basically all knowledge was called as philosophy. And it is precisely after the period of Aristotle in the Western tradition that we see specializations of knowledge emerging, and also different classifications of knowledge, what we popularly understand as taxonomy. So this is basically how knowledge has evolved over the ages. And therefore, to speak of Indian knowledge systems is actually very deeply rooted in the Indian philosophical scenario. Now, just to begin with, I'd like to say that I would prefer to use the word Indian knowledge systems rather than Indian knowledge system. I know that it is in vogue to use the singular Indian knowledge system, but there I have a difference of opinion regarding that, because I believe that India has produced several knowledge systems that don't perfectly align with each other. They differ from each other in different ways, and although they differ from each other, they still contribute to the diversity and richness of Indian culture. So why has Indian knowledge systems been emphasized so much in the post-NEP 2020 era? Now, there is a very, very important reason behind it. And I believe that that would be the right launching pad for my presentation today. It is that now, in the Indian subcontinent altogether, we know that there were several pursuits of knowledge, but all such pursuits of knowledge were basically rooted in the philosophical systems. So philosophy was the base of all human pursuits of knowledge. And in this, and within philosophy, it is basically epistemology or theory of knowledge, which was considered to be the most important or the pivotal element in philosophy, as far as the Indian philosophers were concerned. Several scholars of Indian philosophy, like Professor P.T. Raju, have often remarked that for most of the scholars across the world, especially in the ancient world, philosophy was basically epistemology. Then the Indian philosopher was usually identified as a pramanika. Pramanas are the sources of valid knowledge, and they form the core of philosophy. And that is the reason why epistemology or theory of knowledge was considered as the bedrock on which the entire edifice of philosophy was built. And on top of this edifice of philosophy, we can see that it branches out into various knowledge systems. So therefore, it is basically very, very important to understand or get to the roots of the whole process. And that is where we come to the Indian knowledge systems. Okay, now basically this presentation is an attempt to explore how India's ancient wisdom, traditions and knowledge systems continue to offer valuable insights, methodologies and frameworks that remain surprisingly relevant in our rapidly evolving digital landscape. Now, see, I'd like to say, put in just one comment about what basically is the relevance of Indian knowledge systems in a digital age. See, not just the Indian knowledge systems, but throughout the world, there is a phenomenon going on where every nation has shown a keen and a profound interest in their systems of knowledge. Okay, you can see that in the Greek tradition, you can see that in the Egyptian tradition, and in the Chinese, the Japanese, all these traditions have of late delved deep into their heritage, and they have attempted to unearth the gems that have been passed on to them from their ancestors. Now, this has gained a lot of popularity, especially in the digital age, because the possibility of preserving this knowledge in a pristine form and passing it on without any loss is now very easy thanks to the development of digital technology. So, rather than thinking that in the digital age, the cultural ethos of the past is fast fading away or has become obsolete or redundant, it is right to think that this is the right time to revive ancient knowledge. Because there is one very, very important truth that we have to acknowledge, that every tradition takes pride in its rich heritage. Whatever the ancestors have done in the past, whatever that they have bequeathed to the the generations after them. Now, there may be positives, there may be negatives in them, but whatever it is a heritage that has been passed on, and every nation takes pride in it. Of course, we have to take this with a pinch of salt, because several superstitions, several negative tendencies are also part of every cultural fabric. But definitely, we simply cannot put away or throw away the rare gems that have been passed on to posterity by our ancestors, simply because somewhere it got up with a lot of dark elements, negative elements, because of the progress of history, the different epochs in the progress of history. So therefore, this is the right time to understand, explore, and use it for our advantage. Explore the Indian knowledge systems and our advantage. Okay, see, as we navigate the complexities of artificial intelligence, big data, and transformation, the indigenous knowledge system provide both philosophical grounding and practical approaches that can enrich our technological future. Because, see, whatever is spoken of, some elements of whatever happened in the past or that was produced in the past is contextual. Okay, and a lot of it is on beyond the context, what we call as eternal knowledge that can be accommodated, that can be reinvented in any epoch of history. Okay, and knowledge definitely are one such, because as long as the human race persists in the globe, systems are an integral life, and we are continuously creating new knowledge systems to suit our modern time. So in this particular scenario, it is very, very important that we actually look back into our past and collect all the wisdom that has been passed on to from our ancestors. So we need to first understand basically what the Indian knowledge systems are. So Indian knowledge systems can basically be defined as the indigenous traditions, the sciences, the philosophies, and literature that has evolved over centuries in the Indian subcontinent, that represents a vast repository of knowledge and wisdom. So this basically is it. I gave you the image of the foundation of all culture, all civilization in philosophy. And from philosophy has branched out several systems of knowledge like the sciences, literature, and so many other things. All knowledge systems have basically branched from philosophy. So this together what we call as the Indian knowledge system. Now, what we are going to address today in the is what is the relevance of the Indian knowledge systems in the digital age? Now, a period of history, the digital age is of human history that is characterized by the traditional industry to an economy based on information technology, presenting both challenges as well as opportunities. And we know that the world has transformed much more in the past 20 years than maybe what it had a few centuries earlier. So that is the pace with which it's evolving, thanks to the information technology revolution. So therefore, we address both the opportunities that are provided by the digital age as well as the challenges that it poses in front of us. Now, what is the central question? Now, this is basically the $1 million question that we have to address. How can ancient Indian wisdom remain in the context of AI, big data, and digital? Now, this is the central question that we have to address here. Now, what basically is the scope of Indian knowledge systems? First, we have to begin with philosophy and ethics. I told you philosophy is the bedrock from which all other systems of knowledge. Now, what basically constitutes Indian philosophy? Indian philosophy can be broadly divided into two sets of philosophy. They are the Astika Darshanas as well as the Nastika Darshanas. Those we know generally by we understand by the term Astika as it is used in common parlance. We understand it to be believes in God, or a person is a person who believes in God. But it is in a very different technical sense in Indian philosophy, where basically represents a school of thought that accepts the authority of the Vedas or considers the Vedas to be absolute and true. So those schools of philosophy that have either directly evolved from the or they have taken inspiration from the Vedas and accept the authority of the Vedas, they came to be called Darshanas, and those which opposed, which grew independently and which opposed the authority of the Vedas or did not accept the authority of the Vedas, they were given the nomenclature of Nastika Darshanas. And in the Darshanas, we find the classic 6 schools of Indian philosophy: Sankhya, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Purva Mimamsa, and Uttara Mimamsa, otherwise Vedanta. And in the Nastika school, the important world religions, that is Jainism and Buddhism, as well as the rare Indian school of materialism, which is called as Charvaka Darshana. So this basically constitutes the different schools of Indian philosophy. So that is at the root of the Indian knowledge systems. So it is precisely because of the different knowledge systems, the different systems of epistemology that were evolved by schools. I prefer to use the word Indian knowledge systems rather than use it in the singular as Indian knowledge system. Okay, now apart from that philosophical base, we have several other dimensions to Indian knowledge systems. A very important dimension of it being linguistics and grammar. Well, Panini's Ashtadhyayi is known to most. Several other such literature which have established sophisticated systems for language analysis as well as for generation. Now, which are these systems of literature and peculiar structures are very, very important in the digital era because it can cause in a large measure to the development of language structures in the digital era. Now, moving on further, we have very important components of knowledge and epistemology. Epistemology, as I told you, is basically theory of knowledge. And India has evolved over the ages several systems of epistemology. There is not even a single system of philosophy that has not evolved its own unique epistemology. And logic is definitely an offshoot of epistemology, or it's a specialization within epistemology. India is proud to have developed schools such as Navya Nyaya that have developed very advanced systems of logic and theory of knowledge. Now, just to tell you briefly about the importance and relevance of Navya Nyaya, see, it is in the last decades of the 19th century and the early decades of the 20th century that thinkers like Bertrand Russell and Ludwig Wittgenstein, Alfred North Whitehead, all these thinkers of the Western tradition, they felt a need to evolve a unique language for philosophical expression, a language that was very clear but very systematic, difficult to understand and difficult to articulate, yet which is completely free from any form of equivocation. And that proved to be an important milestone in the development of the Western tradition of philosophy, regarded linguistic turn in philosophy, and that important historical development in the West itself. Now, to tell you, felt the same urge to develop a unique language for philosophical exposition 10 centuries ago, the period of Bertrand Russell, Alfred North Whitehead, and Ludwig Wittgenstein. So that is precisely by the turn of the millennium, that is the 10th century AD, and a century after that, we see the development of a new system of Nyaya. Nyaya, of course, is a very old school of Indian philosophy. And Navya Nyaya is a Nyaya that developed in places like Navadvip in West Bengal. That articulated a unique language for is completely free from any vocation that could consider any particular idea with pristine clarity and purity. So that is the contribution. Of course, the contributions of the great mathematicians, astronomers of the ancient era, they are very well known to all. They were like Aryabhatta, mathematical understanding and chemical observations. Moving further, we have we have two more important, Indian knowledge that we have to look into. One very important system of classical Indian medicine and the life sciences. This is what we popularly understand as Veda and the Brihattari Veda, especially the contributions of Charaka and Shushruta in the Charaka Samhita as well as the Shushruta Samhita and the several other texts that came after that. These have developed an indigenous system of medicine that was at the same time deeply rooted in philosophy and was also purely rational. And there was a lot of investigation, there was a lot of testing. It is purely rational in its outlook. Okay, so that is the very important contribution that we can see from the Indian knowledge systems in the domain of medicine, that is the development of Ayurveda. Then we have immense contributions in the dimensions of arts and aesthetics, to great works like Bharata Shastra. Then we have the traditions of Shastra, both in the northern hemisphere of the country, southern hemisphere. We have different schools of music, different systems of music that have evolved. Okay, and different forms of performing arts as well as systems of aesthetics. And apart from all this, we have also evolved systems of education and pedagogy. Now we have the Gurukul system, which is all of us. The Gurukul system was time immemorial, Itihasas and the Puranas, and they were really put to practice in the known history in our period in Nalanda and Takshashila. that pioneered educational methodologies and systems. Now, moving on to, to connect, because here is not merely to present what Indian knowledge systems are, but also you to reflect deeply and ponder exactly what the sense of Indian knowledge system era and really characterizes the digital age. That is what we are. Salient features of the digital age include information overload and constant connectivity, automation and emerging AI ethics and concerns, the digital divide between the privileged and the underprivileged. So this is fast disappearing. Of course, maybe 2 to 3 decades, the digital divide was indeed a glaring problem, but very soon it was resolved, and now we are moving on to an area where every part of the world, every nook and corner of the world is actually connected. So the digital divide is still persist in a very small measure, but although it is not does not very big measure. The next one is very mental health linked to technology. Now this is a glaring reality in front of all of us. Then we have organization of knowledge. Now, this is a very challenge. On the one hand, thanks to globalization, we have attempts at standardizing and bringing in uniformity. On the other hand, there are also that attempt to rebel against these tendencies, tendencies of homogenization of maintaining the rich diversity of knowledge that the world is basically proud of. What are basically the challenges in the digital age? Now, one very important dimension that we have, loss of cultural, rapid digital globalization have threatened to erode the knowledge systems and cultural practices if they are not properly preserved. So now this becomes a very task in front of us. We have to, if it is a proper activity and time and attention given to the preservation of traditional knowledge, traditional ways of living, there is everything that rapid digitalization and globalization and the resulting homogenization of knowledge and homogenization of cultures, they can very easily pose a very serious threat to indigenous knowledge. The second important thing that we have to add is the shallow learning. Now, digital platforms promote quick social engagement rather than deep contemplative understanding that is central to Indian knowledge traditions. Now, there is a huge gulf between the way knowledge is approached and transacted in the digital, as well as how knowledge was understood and transacted in the ancient times. Now, if we are all aware of the fact that period of time, the entire the Vedic heritage was passed from generation to generation by word of mouth. So the kind of that were during for preserving and passing on a great heritage to the future generations. As opposed to these pains that were taken by the earlier generations, these digital platforms always promote quick learning, and wrong with quick learning, because that only is a sign of efficiency, but the aspect is quite discouraging, that is superficial engagement. Now this will certainly lend a very important blow to all the knowledge that we have acquired in history over a long period of time. Now the most important characteristic feature there was, very deep efforts, profound efforts at preserving and developing and nurturing knowledge. Now, that definitely calls for a very deep engagement with knowledge, but that is slowly being eroded in the digital. Now, the third is indigenous languages. Digital dominance of English and other major languages, pressure on Sanskrit and other Indian languages, traditional knowledge. Now, not only just Sanskrit, but also and all other forms of indigenous knowledge sometimes feel the number of people who really engage with this language, their numbers are dwindling. Of course, efforts from various quarters to revive and to popularize traditional forms of language, even all other forms as well. Somewhere an overshadowing these forms of knowledge by English language. Now, what are basically the philosophical foundations that we have to basically, as I told you, philosophy is the bedrock from which all have evolved. Key ideas, the philosophical foundations that we can find, the very important ones which I'd like to emphasize. The first is dharma, the concept of dharma, dharete iti dharmaha. That is ethical order, which offers a flexible but principled framework for digital ethics. Now, see, we have to understand dharma in a very broad context. Right from the time there was a concept of what is called cosmic order. Cosmic order is something that in the human as well as the non-human, living as well as the non-parallel. But when you define it or when you that same to a human context, you basically call it dharma. So dharma is nothing but rita, a cosmic order that operates in human context. So dharma is very, very important. It is because this dharma that keeps everything forward, takes everything forward, sustains everything. Okay. And dharma, the concept of dharma is very, very important in the digital age because digital ethics is also a very important area. So the do's and don'ts, the ethical dimensions, the ethical practices can be notion of dharma, or we can derive the notions of ethical digital practices notion of dharma. Of course, treating the whole one family, that is Vasudhaiva, promotes a global vision that is rooted in interconnect. So this is a very important concept. Like we are not cut off from each other, living our own lives, but we are all in one way or the other. Biosphere is connected to each other, and we all occupy our own unique niches in this biosphere. We really cannot exist without the other. So we have to always look upon ourselves in the context of the other. So we have to, it is especially in now a world that is connected together globally through the internet, where we have, just by the click of a button, we can, the whole world is accessible to us, the whole world is connected to us. This is the right time to dwell upon the concept of Vasudhaiva. Ayam nija paroveti chetasam udara charitanam tu Vasudhaiva kudumbakam. That is really the shloka. Ayam nija paroveti ganana lakhu chetasam udara charitanam kudumbakam. That means, very fallow, narrow ideas of yours and mine, they belong to small minds. But for the minds which are very broad, which are visionary in nature, for them the whole world is one family. That is basically the shloka there. And third is a very important principle that separates the diversity in knowledge. That is Anekantavada that was offered by Jainism. It encourages multiplicity of. Now that is the key in both Syadvada and Anekantavada. Vada is a metaphysical concept in Jainism, while Syadvada is a concept of language. Okay, so that basically says that anything can be looked at any point of time from several perspectives. So whenever you say that what I say alone is true, or whatever I say is the absolute, then you are really, you don't see the whole picture. You unnecessarily restrict your. This idea is very, very relevant times, because we need to come out of our little shells, our little cocoons, and see the world at large, and see a broader world evolving, and try to picture ourselves in this fast evolving world. Now, what is the digital relevance of the digital in the age? It provides ethical grounding for AI development. What dharma, ethical grounding and data governance. The notion of Kudumbakam offers for balancing progress with human values. So that's very important. unless and until all kinds of development of technology is coupled with human values, then we have a very dark future in front of us. Okay, the classical example for that is that uh, reactions were discovered, the fusion and the fission reactions. What did humanity use it for the first time? It used it to for destroying human life and cause, a misery and pain and suffering for generations to come. So that shows that's a very big lesson that we've learned from history, which tells us that any development of technology should be with principles of ethics. It is going to go haywire and it is going to destroy us. One thing. And then, of course, it fosters humane and inclusive digital policies. So, a very feature of the Indian knowledge systems is the idea of it includes everything within its gamut. Okay, it does not try to keep away anything. It does not try to marginalize anything. So everything is taken as an interconnected whole. Now that is certainly an excellent idea for the digital age. Then, of course, it addresses questions of digital rights and responsibilities. Now, ethical dimensions also questions about rights and responsibilities. Moving on further, next very important dimension to see is Ayurveda. I briefly touched upon it earlier, and digital health. Now, the traditional contributions, holistic health practices, and personalized medicine principles of Ayurveda that integrate mind, spirit, well. Now, this is the most important feature of Ayurveda. Basically stems from the holistic approach that is characterized all Indian knowledge systems. Trump card, an important feature of all Indian knowledge systems is the holistic approach, and we find this most pronounced system of Ayurveda that looks upon medicine not merely as a method of cure, but as a holistic system that prioritizes prevention over cure. Okay, so that is the way Ayurveda has gone about. And the ideal there is the good life. Just like we speak of eudaimonia, the good life as it was envisioned by Aristotle. Similarly, we have visions of the good life were put forward by Charaka, Shushruta, and Vagbhata. Okay, so that is the traditional contribution of Ayurveda. Then we have digital applications can be AI-based Ayurveda diagnosis apps. We know that AI has contributed in the development of medicine and has made the very practice of medicine much easier thanks to several apps. And Ayurveda has not been left behind. And several diagnosis apps have been developed in Ayurveda as well. Then digital like the IoT and machine learning for herbal club. Now, there are also possibilities for future intelligence. There's wisdom with modern, digital platforms throughout India, they combine wisdom with modern health tracking. So there is actually a context of the past as well as the present as well as the idea of digital wellness. Now, Indian mathematics is very, very important domain that is fast developing and has attention of throughout the world. Especially the popularity and the contributions of Vedic mathematics is very, very important. The historical contribution of mathematics. See, I don't belong to the mathematics, so I cannot go much deeper into the contributions of it. But I'll generally just touch upon them. System and the concept of zero, operations of pi, algebraic innovations, recursive logic in Panini, glass binary. Now, digital relevance of this. Now, algorithms and linguistics have been, at least has come up. Algorithms and linguistics have been inspired by Panini, and they have been put to use in natural language. You know that we live in the era of LLMs, the large models, and in this fast developing domain of large language models, all indigenous kind from any part they have been inspired. Such is the structure offered by Park. Then the relevance for AI logic, formal systems, and technologies. Now, here's an important, very quote from power of a Turing. Now, here is another very domain of the Indian knowledge system, that is sustainable. Now, we know that the entire Indian subcontinent has, for time immemorial, believed and has propagated and lived this development, which is considered to be the most important factor for development in the current years. More than just mere development of technology, sustenance of whatever is developed, and the very idea of sustainable development is importance in the modern era. Now, this basically stems from the wisdom of the past. Principles from the Prithvi Sukta and the Upanishads that emphasize harmony and harmony with nature and balance. We have traditional agriculture, indigenous knowledge of water conservation, and sustainable farming practices. Now, see, this is not just from India, but practices and indigenous knowledge of culture, especially from Africa, have come recently. In different parts of the world, they have developed their own indigenous methods of cultivation, largely based on their topography, their climate, and it is really worth to understand these and to see to what extent be incorporated in modern times. Okay, next is digital community-based apps for indigenous ecological practices, documentation of knowledge. Now that is a very important challenge, but it's also a great privilege. Because in the digital era, we could not dream of all the traditional knowledge that we had acquired over centuries and millennia. But now that is definitely a reality. Now, climate conscious design, traditional architecture based on Vastu and vernacular styles respond to local climate conditions. So that is also important. Of course, now Indian schools of architecture, Indian models of architecture are very. There are a lot of people who are studying architecture of the world from different parts of the world, shown interest in traditional ancient Indian architecture. Now, this is another very important area, that is IKS in education and pedagogy. When we think of ancient system of education and pedagogy, the first basically comes to our mind is the Gurukul system. Now, what are the hallmarks of the Gurukul system? It is primarily student, because it is a one-to-one engagement between the master and the student. It is not, for a common lot, but rather Gurukulam system is actually a system of mentoring, which is a one-to-one relationship between the master and the student. So the master delivers to the student, looking at the capacity of the student, the needs of the students, and the interest of the students. So that is basically it's a student-centered approach, and it is also a value-based learning approach. We know that a classical Gurukul system of education envisioned that even the great princes, they had to lead a simple life. They had to their gurus in simple hermitages and hard work, lead a very austere life, learn, because that was believed to be the ideal condition for learning. That is the Gurukul system of knowledge. And next is the emphasis on dialogue. Shravana, Manana, and Niditya. This is very, very important. This was passed on by our ancestors, is very, very important. It is Veda Vedanta that speaks of these three ideas, that is Shravana and Niditya. So Shravana is the idea where you learn something from from the mouth of the Guru. You hear it from the Guru, and if that mere hearing or learning by heart, so what you hear from the Guru was certainly not the method, but whatever learned had to be deeply contemplated upon. You had to do manana. That is, you have to intellectually deliberate over what you have learned, and you have to rationalize it, and you have to be rationally convinced of the truth of it. And this will bring to the forefront several doubts which the student can clear from the Guru at a very personal level. And only after doubts that you really arrive at knowledge that is that you are completely of, and which you can completely focus, you can meditate upon, you can try to realize that knowledge. And that is the third component, which is called as nididhyasana. Now, then we have the practical skill. So it is not mere bookish knowledge, but rather, all forms of warfare, all kinds training, all these were incorporated along with intellectual learning Gurukul system. So it is again a holistic approach to education here with the integration of several components that are necessary for human life. Then we have the personalized instruction that is based on student app. Now this is also very good. The attitude of the person is very has to be understood, and the entire system, even if you look at emphasizes a lot in oneself and understanding and discerning where our real vocation lies, wherein lies our true aptitude. That is considered to be very important. What are the things that we can develop, we can absorb from the past of education and pedagogy? We can apply it in the digital age. We have modules using IKS developed by UG IKS cell, AI-based personalized learning tools built on traditional pedagogy, Gurukulas and digital programs, experience through AR and VR technologies. Now, the things that we operate. This is the meeting ground of the past, and where you can look to the future, analyze this knowledge, and we can add to the digital. Now, linguistic Panini's computational Adhyay was as a generative grammar model that anticipated modern computational linguistics by thousands of years, and Sanskrit's precise rule-based structure makes it particularly computational applications and AI development. And you can just search that a lot of people have actually worked on this. Of the different world languages, Sanskrit is one of the best suited for developing large language models because its unique rule-based structure, the very structure of the system makes it suitable for in computational and AI development. Then include translation, chat, natural language processing for Indian languages based on traditional linguistic principles. Now, globalization of this is IKS has for some time been evolving, and it is fast evolving onto a global platform. Now, this is not just peculiar knowledge systems, but I believe that all conventional, traditional knowledge, especially what is comparable to the Indian knowledge systems, is the knowledge systems that were in the different, the African continent, okay, and even in South America. Now, coming out into the public domain, and it is seeing the light of the day. Now, as part of the initiatives to digitalize this, we have MOOCs and courses on IKS, making traditional knowledge accessible globally. Then we have, this is the best part of globalization of IKS, that is the preservation, digitization of manuscripts through like the National Mission has been and has taken traditional knowledge forward in a very big way. And we all feel very happy because this is an era where we can use technology to secure the and pass it on to the future generations in the best manner possible through digitization of the immersive experience, podcasts, YouTube channels, and AR/VR experiences of traditional arts are now available. Challenges to integrating IKS digitally, because whenever we speak of the possibilities, we also have to address the challenges that it may encounter. It encounter several challenges. The first is the risk of commodification. Digital platforms may reduce profound traditions to superficial content, risking appropriation with proper context or respect. See, not in a formal, if you see the kind of Instagram reels and that promote that that are dedicated to promoting indigenous knowledge, some of them are at least really spurious. All that they want to make is a lot of money from this, because the moment you speak of traditional ancient knowledge, a lot of people around the globe, not only in India, they seem to be very interested and they start following you. But the veracity of such ventures are certainly that needs to be really looked into. So that is a risk of commodification. Then translation challenges. A daunting task in translating nuanced concepts from Sanskrit and other Indian languages without losing their depth. Because currently involved in an international project where we are learning 11th century work of Acharya Udayananda. It is actually a collaboration between 3 countries, the US, UK, and I am one of the participants. We have discussed a lot. Comes in our discussion is the difficulties with translation, especially in English. Difficulties are faced by traditional scholars. But of course, unless and until really translate at least the best possible manner, its reach will be highly restricted. So it is really worthwhile to create and increase the reach of traditional. Then standardize requirements for rigorous research and standardization to ensure authentication of IKS format. And now this is very, very. Now anything that we do, it requires for its proper development, it requires a critical engagement. So there is a thoughtful contextual engagement rather than uncritical digitization of traditional knowledge. So one has to be very, very while you enter the domain of the ancient knowledge systems, and one has to ascertain the veracity of the text and the knowledge resources before you actually embark upon it. So critical engagement is absolutely necessary. Then, of course, there are case studies of government initiatives like the IKS division under AICT. I'll quickly go through this because I know that I don't wish to take too much time, because we need to have some time at least for discussion. We need to establish or promote IKS. AICT is established to promote research, teaching, and applications of Indian knowledge systems in modern education and technology. We have the Digital India Mission and the Bhuvan. Then case studies. I'll quickly go through these. UNESCO recognition of yoga, and this is, of course, a very well-known reality, all of us. Inscription of yoga on the representative heritage of humanity, acknowledging its global. Blockchain for knowledge protection. Blockchain-based protection systems developed in Australia and Africa, models for preserving and protecting traditional knowledge. Academic interest, academic research, Ayurveda, and other knowledge at prestigious universities worldwide, and framework for digital ethics that we can get from traditional India, that is what are called as the 5 principles of yoga. Yama, the Pancha Mahavratas in Jainism, Asteya, Aparigraha, and Brahmacharya. They are important principles to be incorporated into the age. And we know that one person who was deeply inspired in the modern era was Gandhiji. Mahatma was deeply inspired by the Pancha Mahavratas, are called as the Yamas in the system of yoga. Traditional medicine ecosystem, electronic health records integrating Ayurvedic diagnostics, AI-powered dosha analysis applications. I had actually referred to that earlier also. There are several applications that help us do dosha analysis in Ayurveda. Digital libraries of medicinal plants and formulations, telemedicine platforms for Ayurvedic consultations. The research opportunities include big data analysis of traditional treatment outcomes, machine learning for personalized Ayurvedic protocols, digital documentation of rare treatments and practices, and integration with modern medical systems for holistic care. Next, coming over to mathematics and astronomy, I think, quickly just skip. We have development of decimal system and early astronomical calculations by scholars like Aryabhatta. Then we have medieval advancements like the Kerala School of Mathematics, the 14th, 16th centuries, developing early calculus concepts and infinite series. Then computational algorithms based on traditional mathematical methods used in modern software development, and integration of ancient astronomical knowledge with modern space technology and computational astronomy. Then, of course, we have umpteen opportunities in developing in the domain arts as well as in music, sound, then traditional architecture, then traditional education in this is also very, very important. We have digital platforms that make traditional knowledge accessible anytime. Now, knowledge is available 24/7, anytime, anywhere, breaking geographical and temporal barriers. Then we have a large number of digital courses. There's a growing number of online courses on various aspects of Indian knowledge systems available through platforms like Swayam, and the reach is it's outstanding. Millions of people engaging with Indian knowledge traditions through digital and online communities. I skip this and just touch upon inspired water management, digital monitoring systems based on traditional water harvesting and techniques, construction. It is just because of the paucity of time that I'm quickly going through this, because each of these, of course, demands separate sessions. There is so much of possibility for explanation, so much of discussion possibilities are there. I'm quickly going through all this so that we at least have some time discussion and deliberation. Then in construction, digital design tools for climate responsive architecture based on traditional building wisdom, agriculture, smart crop rotation and natural methods, renewable energy systems inspired energy efficient designs, and circular economy based on traditional zero waste approaches to resources. Then preservation, digital preservation of cultural heritage is the way forward. Now, to the last part of the presentation, how can we incorporate Indian knowledge systems in the domain of research and development? First is by ensuring interdisciplinary research. Foster collaboration between IKS scholars and STEM researchers to develop innovative application technologies, develop digital repositories, establish comprehensive open access directories and database resources with proper metadata and search capabilities. Then curriculum integration, which is very, very incorporate IKS into school and college education through hybrid models that combine traditional wisdom with modern pedagogy. The way forward is through global collaboration. As I told you, Indian knowledge system should never remain within the confines of the Indian subcontinent. In the earlier times, it did remain within, completely confined within the Indian subcontinent. Of course, knowledge exchanges in the ancient world, but it was quite limited. Now we have in digital era, we have a great possibility for taking indigenous knowledge, whatever nation it be, indigenous knowledge. We can take it to a global forum where it can be enjoyed, understood, and practiced by any person whoever is interested in it. Okay, so that is the way ahead. That is knowledge exchange. Then we have ethical frameworks, which are very important, because as we move in the digital era, the ethical tools, the ethical ideas that we can get from the Indian knowledge system, they are of utmost importance in taking AI and other digital knowledge forward in a very secure and peaceful manner forward. Then technological partnerships form global consortiums to develop technologies that integrate traditional wisdom with cutting-edge digital. To conclude, see, tradition is not of fire. It's a very thought-provoking quote from Gustav Mahler, and it speaks a lot. See, merely understanding knowledge systems is not merely clinging on to the past. It is attempts to understand the past so that we can this knowledge in the present era and take it forward so that it makes our lives qualitatively better. And that is really the idea. So it is not, many people associate IKS with ideologies and so many are very unfortunate because, as I told you, it is not just IKS but knowledge, indigenous knowledge systems from every part of they are a very big way in modern times, and they are also receiving a lot of is being understood, and they are receiving a lot of acceptance. Now, we can all incorporate all these into our current understanding of knowledge practices, which are existing knowledge practices. So it is not obsolete, but definitely relevant. Indian knowledge systems represent a reservoir of resilient, adaptable, and holistic wisdom that can address many challenges of the digital age. Now, the digital revolution provides unprecedented opportunities to revive, reintegrate IKS, benefit of humanity, sustainable development. These are the references that I had touched upon. Thank you one and all for lending me a patient ear. I know that a topic as broad as this can really never be completely on in a very short span of time, and I had to rush through a few slides because of the time. It's a vast knowledge. It's an ocean of knowledge, and if I was at least to give a panoramic, a bird's eye view of what Indian knowledge systems is, and also we could at least think of how we can incorporate Indian knowledge systems in the digital era. What are the challenges that we face as part of this, and how we can actually overcome many obstacles and go ahead with the rejuvenation of traditional knowledge. I think the job is done.